So let me ask you a question. How many of you, when you think about your relationships with other people, attach a yes, but to that relationship? There's a witness. Great. We attach yes, buts to our relationship. I love my husband, but I love my wife, but I get on well with my neighbor, but I work well with my colleagues, but we all do it. We all do it. And we all want people to behave in a particular way. And when they don't, or when circumstances don't go our way, we have this yeah, but. Have you ever wondered what sorts of yeah, buts people attach to their description of their relationship with you? Surely you're thinking, no, there's no yeah buts with me because everybody knows. Anyway, we have these things and they go right to our heart as human beings. And I want to argue today that it does so because when we attach yeah buts to other people, and we all do it, it's a sign that we're attaching yeah buts to God. That we have expectations about the way that God should be, and when God doesn't do this or do that, we attach a yeah but to God. God is good, but I believe in God, but the Bible's a great story, but. And that's what happens in this story today. It's a great story. The verses that preceded the one today is a story about Jesus healing the man who was born blind. Never seen a thing for his entire life long. And in the story, Jesus approaches him and he takes a little dirt and he spits in it and makes a little bit of mud and rubs it in the man's eyes and says, "Go and wash in the pool of Siloam." And the man did so miraculously. Immediately his eyes were opened and he could see. He could see for the first time in his life. Now Jesus did this miracle as he did all the miracles so that we might read the stories of those things and believe. Because as everyone knows, no one can just come along with someone and a little spit in the eye and enable someone who's blind from birth to be able to see. But Jesus did this as a sign of God's presence among the people. He did this in order to open not only the eyes of the blind man, but the eyes of everyone else as well, to enable them to see. But there were people there who were adding their yeah buts to the situation. And they said, well, he might be a prophet. Certainly he seems to be gifted with medical talents, but he healed on the Sabbath day, which was a big deal for them because they had very strict rules about the Sabbath being a day of rest. And they said no prophet would ever heal on the Sabbath because the Sabbath is a strictly observed religious ritual that God has ordained that we should rest on the Sabbath. And here's this fellow healing on the Sabbath. They said, yeah, but. Yeah, but. Why did they do that? Why did they add this yeah, but? Why do we do it? Why do we go on holiday and say that was a great holiday? Yeah, but the sheets that I was sleeping on my bed were scratchy sheets. I can't believe things worked out that way. It was a great holiday, but it rained. We always have the buts. It's because we have this expectation that things should be a particular way, and when they're not, we get upset. Now, this past week I had the privilege of going to a place called the Hall of Surgeons. It's a place in Edinburgh, and perhaps some of you have been there. It's a fascinating place. 5 stories, 5 floors of this building, and it's all medical curios from the 19th century. pictures and more importantly, body parts that reveal all kinds of diseases and broken bones and heartaches and the damaging effects of accidents and warfare and on and on. It's a fascinating place. And it's not just there as a freak show. It's there in order to document the rise of medical science and the ways in which clever men and women have striven over the years to alleviate suffering, to address the yeah buts in life, to address the problems. And the rise of medical science, and Scotland has been historically a world leader in the rise of medical science. It's based on an idea that came out of the 18th century, which suggests that all problems can be solved. That all problems can be solved. And they looked at medical science not they looked at disease and accidents not as a sign of God's judgment, but rather as a problem to be solved. As a problem to be solved. And I, for one, am very thankful they've did so because I'm a beneficiary of that amazing power. That I am so grateful that I live in the 21st century, where if I break an arm or a bone, I can be cared for and healed. It wasn't always so. Now, this idea that all problems can be solved is an excellent idea because so many problems have been solved. But we take that idea that all problems can be solved into every aspect of life, which justifies our sense of yeah, but. Because underlying that idea that all problems can be solved is the sense that all suffering is bad. Yeah, all suffering is bad. That's the idea that we have. And so when we go on holiday and the sheets are scratchy, even though we've paid a high fee for the rental, we get upset. When things don't go according to plan, we say, yeah, but. And as you and I know, it's often that God that gets the blame. It's God that gets the blame when things don't go according to plan. A short story, though. In this museum, amongst many other horrible things, there's 2 skeletons. And you look at these skeletons and you think, this is not a human skeleton. Because the leg bones are all twisted up. The legs look like a pair of pretzels hanging from this, and the spine is all twisted over, and the rib cage is not, everything looks mixed up. And the story, as you read the caption, it says, these are the skeletons of 2 women who struggled with rickets. Now, rickets was a disease that happened in the anytime a person is deprived of sunlight during their childhood and formative years, they struggle with a lack of the production of vitamin D. And rickets was a problem in Britain, in Scotland, in Glasgow, in Edinburgh, in the tenements which were built so close together that often the sunlight never got down to the street level. And as a result of this, the children who played in the streets, as all children do, literally never had the light of day on their bodies, and so suffered deficiencies in production of vitamin D. And what that does is it compromises the development of your bones, and they grow all crooked and twisty, and a person is then crippled for life. Now, the reason I bring up the story of these 2 women is that rickets is particularly harmful for women because during puberty, their pelvis doesn't broaden the way it does in a healthy girl. They remain with the pelvis that's the shape that they had in childhood, which makes the birth of children not only difficult, but downright dangerous, because the pelvis is not broad enough to allow an infant to pass through. And very tragically, many of these women simply died in childbirth, because the baby would get stuck and they would not be able to deliver the child. But what is amazing to me, not only about their story, but about many of the other stories of people suffering, is how they were able just to get on with it anyway. And these women, who would have known full well the dangers of becoming pregnant, nonetheless ran the risk in order to risk the possibility of loving and being loved. And some of them safely delivered their children. Such a remarkable testimony of the human spirit, and more importantly, the willingness of the community to gather around someone who's suffering and enable them to have a more meaningful life. Enable them, in spite of their suffering, to find hope. Now, the thing about these deliveries is that eventually they figured out that this is actually caused by the deficiency of vitamin D, which is caused by the lack of sunlight, which then led to the demolition of the tenements and a whole new way of thinking and being as a community, where that disease is a thing of the past, and many others as a result. We tend to think of all suffering as being bad, and much suffering is. No one likes to suffer. No one likes to suffer, especially not children who are made to sit through a worship service where an old man keeps talking and talking and talking. I'm going to be talking to you guys in just a minute, so 2 more minutes and I'll be with you. When we suffer, we tend to think God is not with us. We tend to blame God when we suffer. But the witness of Christianity is that God is with us in the midst of suffering. I have a friend who's the minister of a declining church and a declining denomination in America. And I asked him, why are you the minister here? And he says, well, John, I'm like that rat that swims towards the sinking ship. And I've thought of that many times. Now, God is no rat, but ours is a God who swims towards us in the midst of our heartaches. God is not afraid to be with us in the valley of the shadow of death. Jesus came and lived among us. Jesus suffered with us and for us that we might know that God is among us. That God is with us in the valleys and in the darkness, every bit as much as when God is with us in the mountaintops and in the sunshine. That God is with us at all times. And interestingly, I've heard you tell me over and over and over again, it was during that dark night, during that time of personal suffering and loss, that God became real to me. That it was in the darkness that the light of God was a saving grace. When Jesus approached this blind man, his disciples asked him, who sinned, this man or his parents? They were looking for a reason. And Jesus said, neither. But he was born blind that the glory of God might be revealed in him. And his eyes were open when he realized that God is with us in the midst of suffering and not just in the good times. Friends, I want to encourage you, if you're going through a dark place in your life, and we all have to deal with those dark places, I pray that God would open your eyes, just as he opened the eyes of the blind men, that you might see God and know his amazing grace and sing the song, Amazing Grace, I once was blind, but now I see. Amen.